film The Matrix captured the imagination of many. There was something about it that just resonated and thought, wow, maybe it could be true. Today, I'm actually going to tell you what is the real Matrix. And although a lot of what was in the film is not true, there is something about it that is very true. Let me explain. So the first thing is we have our brain. That's where all our thoughts are, and everybody knows that. And I want you to think of that as hardware. It doesn't have any emotion. It's just hardware, and it can do anything. But it's just hardware. And it gets inputs and sends control signals out to the body. And the body receives sensory inputs from the world, the creation around us. Now these three things here is the kind of classical, or the way in which most people, especially in the Western world, think this is what we are. We're a brain, we're a body, we've got some molecules, there's some biochemistry, etc. And this is it. And there's a world out there. And that's about as far as it normally goes. And there isn't anything more to that. And science can basically explain everything. But then there's another component, the ego, the mind concept developed by Freud and then taken much further by Carl Jung. And you got the ego, the mind. And the mind, Jung said the mind is actually what's controlling the brain. And he also referred to something called the superego, and I'm going to call that universal consciousness, or God, or whatever you want to call it. But there's some kind of a supreme spirit. In Hinduism, it'd be the Paramatma, and it is the universal consciousness. Okay, so now we've got two other elements in there, and you may or may not believe in the universal consciousness. You probably think that, okay, yes, there is the mind out there. But let's say the universal consciousness, and some people will call that God. And this is the thing, is our ego claims to be separate from the universe. That I am separate from the rest of the universal consciousness. I am a part of creation, but I am not creation. Okay. And the problem is that because the ego claims to be separate from God and from this universal consciousness, it basically says, brain, look, I'm in control of the body, not this other universal consciousness of God. And it wants to be God for you. And the ego distorts, blocks, creates falsehood. In Hinduism, this is the concept of Maya, illusion. And I want you to think of this as rogue software. It's rogue software that is giving incorrect inputs into the brain and giving us a incorrect understanding of who we are. And in many ways, it's this rogue software is the Matrix that's referred to in that film. And of course, in the Matrix in that film is a whole bunch of AI computers that have created the rogue software. But I want to tell you today, it's not computers that have created the rogue software, it's you yourself. You yourself have created that rogue software that is really screwing you up in ways that you cannot imagine. It is the thing that makes you miserable. It's the thing that makes you fearful. It's the thing that makes you angry. It's the thing that makes disturbs your body. It's the thing that causes all kinds of hormonal imbalances. It's the thing that triggers off cancer. It's the one thing that is really making your life an absolute misery. And Buddha basically was trying to say this. Buddha back in 500 BC saying is that life is full of suffering. You are the cause of that suffering, basically the ego. Suffering can stop by effectively following the middle path. The middle path is all about detaching from and not allowing your ego to come into being and tap into the universal consciousness directly. That's basically what Buddha was trying to say. And I've got that here. So what does that all mean? So this whole thing here is impermanent, meaning that when you die, the ego is finished, the brain is gone, the body is gone. And it's the thing that causes suffering, as I said, fear, anger, hate. It is the matrix. And it thinks in linear Newtonian terms, and it's limited to 4 dimensions, 3 spatial dimensions, X, Y, and Z, and time, only going in 1 dimension. So this is the thing that's the matrix. Okay, so what's real then? Well, I want to tell you that what's real is that the universal consciousness, and real meaning, and I'll come to it in a minute, real is something that is a truth and is permanent, is the spirit. And the spirit, your spirit, is actually linked into the universal consciousness. You could call this the soul, or spirit, whichever way you want to think about this. And the spirit is trying to communicate and trying to get through to the brain and get through the thoughts. But there's kind of like a firewall, a kind of antivirus shield, if you like, that the ego has put around it. And for most people, for most of the time, is that the spirit can't break through that firewall. Occasionally, you might have some glimpses of it. You might have, some people obviously have all kinds of supernatural experiences, near-death experiences, pre-birth experiences, anything kind of supernatural, is the spirit has managed to get in. Obviously, through meditation, you can break through that firewall as soon as you try and detach from that ego. And the spirit is trying to communicate with you, but the ego is not letting you, because the moment that you realize this element, the truth and the reality that are linked to the universe consciousness, then you will ignore the ego, and the ego will be effectively redundant, and it does not want to be made redundant. You will end up in Christian theology terms, you'll end up crucifying the ego. And the truth is the spirit actually also brings healing to the body, and it is the energy form. And this universal consciousness is an energy form, and it's the most fundamental unit of energy. And it has, like energy, it has a wavelength. And I will posit that the wavelength is equal to the Planck's constant, 10 to the minus 34. It's very, very small. It's undetectable by us. You can't make a machine that can detect it, unfortunately. But everything is at that kind of that level. And the spirit is a form of energy, and it's actually the thing that brings life to us and brings healing, can bring healing to us. It's the one that through and in Hinduism and in Indian philosophy, it will be talking all about your chakras, and each of your chakras are 7 main chakras are on your located at the same place as your hormonal endocrinal organs that put hormones out into your body that regulate the body. And the ego is what actually makes all those things go out of whack. Once your hormones go out of whack, your body chemistry goes out of whack. Illnesses, tumors, cancers, diabetes, blah, 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 all those other things, cholesterol, heart disease, the list goes on, start developing. But if the chakras are all balanced and everything is in order, then all the hormone levels are all in order, then you get healing. And so the spirit can bring healing directly through the energy channels of the chakras. Acupuncture also similar in terms of activating those energy lines that are in your body. But here's the other thing, is all things, all creation is manifested through spirit, through the universal consciousness. God said, let there be light, and there was light. E equals MC squared is energy and mass are interchangeable. And spirit and consciousness actually manifest creation. It's not and we are part of creation, and we can manifest. And then this is the thing that's very scary, is whatever it is that we're thinking and whatever it is we are believing manifests, if you believe it strongly. Unfortunately, most of us believe all kinds of terrible things about ourselves and about the world, and that's why terrible things continue to manifest. But this is the truth. Now, this portion actually is permanent. Is when we die, spirit does not die. It just goes into another form, and it goes like energy, just gets transferred from one energy form to another energy form. Spirit goes from one form to another form. So it is permanent. There is no death. There is no death. And this is unfortunately one of the massively misunderstood messages of Jesus. Is the reason I believe, and for a long time, the reason why I believe he ended up allowing himself to be crucified was to show that this is not permanent. Death is not permanent. And he resurrected himself to show this is everlasting life. And each of you have the promise of everlasting life. Don't be afraid of death. Don't be afraid of these things. It's that the truth is that if you live in love, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Jesus' message is a message of love. Love God, love one another, love yourself. And this love is an energy form. It is the form of energy of the universal consciousness. It is love. It is peace, it is joy, it's permanent, it's bliss. And when you realize that truth and you unplug yourself from the mind, that rogue software, you reach that position of enlightenment. And that's what those sage and the spirits are enlightened. Buddha was enlightened. Jesus, obviously, a highly enlightened being, knowing I and the Father are one. That's what he meant. And it's unplugged, and it's quantum. The physics and the science behind it is all to do with quantum, with probabilities and wave functions. It's non-linear, and it is a 10th dimensional entity, which I'll talk about in another video. And this is beyond space and time, and that is the reality of what we live in. And our ego is a rogue software that stops us from knowing the truth. Thank you for your attention.